All right, guys, we're going to get this wonderful discussion started. Today, we have two amazing educators in our activity helping us today, talking about the A class. Today, this is the Instructors Roundtable presented by Future Independent Winterguard. Welcome, everybody, as you might be today here live with us, or you'll be seeing this on a recording. Today, our panelists are Miss Breverly Brahan. Would you like to introduce yourself? You're mute, Breverly.
Right. Hey, y'all. It's great to see everybody. Breverly Brahan, an educator by trade and have been judging for WGI for quite some time. And my primary caption is movement. And I do some GE as well. And currently I serve as the individual analysis caption manager.
All right, Mississippi representing on the board. Yeah, girl, keep going. I love you, Miss Breverly. All right, and then we have the famous Mr. Micheal Lentz, who, of course, you know him from the Onyx, but I'm gonna let him introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Micheal Lentz. Yeah, Onyx is my primary thing. This year will be our 35th year. I've been there since the beginning, but I have the great opportunity to work with and design for lots of marching bands, color guards in all 6 WGI classes, and a lot of drum corps stuff in my past. I'm really glad to be here to get to chat and to be paired with Breverly, who will be the master of the sheets. I'll just tell you how I interpret that.
Yes. As you know, we're focusing primarily on the, let me go back to my technology savvy. Primarily focusing on the A class sheets. And, you know, a lot of times when people go into critique, they don't know how to interpret the sheets. They don't know how to interpret the terminology that the judges uses, or they don't know how to break down, okay, what am I doing wrong? What is wrong with my show? How can I fix it? How can I take the knowledge that the feedback, am I getting that back? And so I like to always approach every year like I'm a brand new instructor, okay? This is how we're going to look at it. So we're going to start with the equipment caption. I think that's what's on the screen right now. The equipment caption. Yes, we're starting the equipment caption. And starting you, Breverly, just a generalization on like when you're looking at the guard and you have the sheet in front of you, like what is your general analysis, how to interpret with the guard to go into which box?
Okay, so and if it's okay, I will couple some of because movement and equipment, the approach from an IA individual analysis standpoint is similar. It's very much the same. So our responsibility is to evaluate what performers are doing and then how well they do that. And when we talk about the A class and on the sheets, which, you know, folks don't have sheets anymore. I mean, you have to go to the rule book or you have to go to the website. We used to write scores on the sheet, and it was a great way for everyone to really understand and be able to see the words and the value and that kind of thing. And now it's far more up to instructors to research this, find this, and study it yourselves. So the way that we approach the captions, both equipment and movement, we're looking at specific skills. We're looking at a variety of skills. We're looking at whether or not they're in combination with one another. We call the different areas of what we evaluate, we call those the points of comparison. And that's in the center with that kind of darker gray area. And it's in both the vocabulary and the excellence. So, and we are supposed, as much as possible, to weigh those equally, to look at range of skills, variety and depth of skills, to look at the dynamics that performers are doing, the blend of body and equipment, and then is it compatible? And that's in the vocabulary aspect of it. And the as you can see, the bulleted points help us figure out which box to go to. And it's got some qualifying words. Good, box 3, for instance. Good, average, it's a work in progress, moderate. So as we're evaluating, then that leads us to a certain area. Box 4 is broad and varied, and you can see that throughout the sheets. When you look at excellence, we also have those same points of comparison, and there are 5 opportunities there that talks primarily about training, achievement, and whether the performers understand what it is that instructors have asked them to do.
Thank you, Bradley. Michael, from the standpoint of a director, like if looking at the sheet, like how would you make decisions from a director standpoint to make sure that you have success, and how do you take the feedback when they're referring to areas of this? Just how do you take that and apply it to your program?
Oh, I wanted to tell you too, I'm just the designer for Onyx. My directorship ended in 2018. So, and Jason's here, he's the real director. So, but I get to do the fun stuff. He does the bad stuff. For an instructor, for me, when the kids have to be trained, and I realize training is going to come at different levels, and what is training? In equipment and movement, fundamentals are paramount. But if you think the students, there's some really good examples on the Scholastic A video this year. I don't know if you want me to mention a group in that A class or not. Northmont, that'd be a good one to talk about. They were 4th, and I had not seen them. I went and watched it, and the kids were pretty well trained. They could do a good bit, and little things where they used their feet or their hands to just enhance what they were doing with the gun or the flag. I think that's something that we all get caught up in, is I want my kids to throw 6s, they're going to throw turnarounds, a ripple across here, but when in fact the students are not prepared for that. Interesting potential philosophy is day 1 when the kids come in, what about having them all start on rifle and don't do tech, just get them up in the air. I think if the kids can see themselves fearless throwing it when it's still fun, you may be able to go back and really build a structure for them. I look at it now, and the way students and life is, everything's so immediate. They don't want to stand on a block and do drop spins, and flutters on the right, on the left, and all of that. Sorry, I talk with my hands, so I'm going to try to keep them down. I would look at the talent I have, and I would consider, which I'm sure we all do, who could be a weapon, who could be a dancer. We got a great flag duet. And I would make smart, creative choices. There are tried and true things in A class that if you do it, it's going to set you apart. And you have so many choices. So I think it comes down to training, movement, and equipment. And if someone's rifle heavy, then it falls back to the writer to fill those phrases in with steps, the same way you do gun. So a few years ago, got the chance to work with a choreographer who, she's all dance. And then we wanted to do all rifle. So we had her teach the rifles movement phrase first, and then we wrote the choreo. Then we had her write rifle choreo. That didn't go well because it was just not competitive discussion. All right, so I'm going around in circles. If we want the team to be successful, I think they have to have and show training from the door to the door. So everything they do, we're kind of making an assessment. Although I think most judges are still wrapping up. You kind of get, oh, here we go. But you want to make them look good. Can there be hair in the equipment caption? Yeah, Brownsburg showed us that this year. I think the body, oh gosh, okay, I'm just jumping around. Is that okay?
Yeah.
This is like how I really am. Body language. If we're watching our guard, say we let them go to break or dinner, just watch their body language. Same thing going to a water break. They're them. You can tell if they're mad, if they're happy, by what they're doing. But then when they pick up a flag or horn, they're more likely to lose that to try to become this machine that we're working on. If we can find a way to harness that, so we don't take them out of the equation and we stay interesting them the whole time, I think they'll grow up pretty successfully in A class. A class, I like to talk more about design, but if somebody can't do something, you can always layer them out. I love a good ripple. I think a unison break, a cannon or a ripple that'll make it fuller, and contrary motion, lots of things to make the performers look good and feel good. And I would probably day one also talk to them about looking the part. And some groups will talk about the score sheets. I work with some that do that. I don't really do that with the kids, but they talk about the sheets, what the judges said. I let them listen to judge audio almost always, but the score, you know it and we'll know it, and the score sheets will guide you. I still think two groups in Independent A, aside from them, most of the Independent A guards looked like A guards. They were spinning A class stuff. But man, the A class is so much more broad and full than it was previously. Those kids are growing into open, and the open guards, a lot of them are doing world-class skills, a lot, which is great. And those are their skills, their choices. Like if you want to spin all flag, it's an equipment sheet. It's not a rifle sheet. If you want to do all anything, Diamante had one flag this year, just one. So those are cool choices that people make. In A class, our A team, we did one rifle. He was a great gun, so we kind of rode it around him, and it worked out fine. So I think encouraging groups to be themselves. We don't all have to do the same equipment, or maybe it shouldn't look like the same person rode it all the time. Just feel free to question me or sass me if you may talk about something.
I think you're onto something, because I think I mean Beverly can chime in, because like people will see success and they think, okay, well that was successful, and then they think that's automatically the recipe for success, and they think they have to emulate that and they have to copy that instead of being themselves. So how can I think you're onto something when you talk about staying true to yourself, because like how can we make sure like when we see somebody on that's using the sheet and they have figured out a recipe for success, like how do we apply that to ourselves, making sure we are staying true to ourselves?
We all have a voice, whether we choose to listen to it or not. I think oftentimes in guard, it's a competition. If we listen to ourselves, we could feel like we're being selfish, or we become emotional about it. Back in 2009, we decided at auditions, we talked to all the people auditioning, that we didn't want to look like Onyx had looked. It's a new thing. We're not going to be able to stand in someone else's light and try to be better than them doing what they do. So we decided to dig our own tunnel, get our own vision. And that worked for that team, and it still does, because we know what we want, and it's our job to include the performers and have them show everybody else what it is. And that certainly comes through training, expressive training, technical training. But that's a scary voice. But I encourage people, always have, you gotta listen to it. It's not going to tell you to put the kids in a van in a snowstorm, with no gas and make them, it's going to be creative. And that's what you can do in equipment and movement. That's really going to be your first voice, I think, and get your kids hooked onto that. What makes you different? What makes your team stand out even a little bit?
And I would say from the judges' point of view, Michael is exactly right, especially in the A class. Because there are plenty of A guards who have a formula, or they have the recipe and they're doing all the right things and they get a really good score. But when we're talking about the comparison process, and we're talking about those, that have the edge, they have an identity, they know their role, they know who they are. And so it elevates them automatically. And I would say that really bleeds into each of the captions. maybe a little less downstairs, although it's still very apparent when you were trying to make some of those really tough decisions in the comparison process. So that's a really great point. Because we see, I mean, most local shows as well as regionals is A. It's a regional A and A. And that's where we live. And to be able to make some of those differences, it comes down to that, to the identity and to the role and being yourselves. And is that coming through your performers?
I think Micheal has, I mean, I think you guys have amazing points because I think when I was watching A-Class this year, seeing so many groups come to A-Class finals and supporting those A-Class teams was like the biggest point of the whole season for me, because I don't think people realize A-Class is the foundation of what we do. It's the foundation of WGI. And when those years of those A-Class performers would go in an arena and they have an empty arena, I don't think that was fair. I always tell my groups, like, go watch the elementary groups, go watch the cadets groups, go watch the novice groups, because those kids they give time, they give effort, they give their passion just like you do. So you need to give them the same type of respect they give you when they got to sit there and watch your performance. So I think that and trying to just be true to yourself are two great points, amazing points. I never thought about it that way, Micheal and Breverly. You guys are teaching me right now. So thank you. So I think Breverly pretty much covered two of the sheets already. So I think we can move on.
Can I chime in for a second, Martell?
Okay, Ricardo.
So I'm gonna ask this question, and it's gonna start with Breverly, and then Micheal, I want you to finish it up. So Breverly, when you were looking at training, what necessarily is a judge looking for that classifies as training? Because I think this is where it gets a little wiggly from instructor to instructor and from color guard to color guard. Like, we've always been taught that, or the way I tell my kids is, the way that you're going to be the best color guard is if everyone does the same thing the same way. And is that the way we should be approaching the training? Then for the second half, after Breverly, when you get done, Micheal, as a designer, how do you design those skills to showcase the students being the same, doing the same thing, and really maximizing? Because that's truly what A-Class is about. It's about maximizing and making sure that you understand the technique and that the design is 100% clear and it is focused all the way through. Maybe there's a lot in one question, but I'll let y'all run with that.
Go on ahead, Ricardo.
Hey, yeah, Ricardo, thank you. What a great, just a great question, because training, especially in the IA captions, training is the foundation. And to me, the IA captions are the foundation for general effect and design and everything else, right? And yes, making sure that everyone does the skill the same way is vital. From a judge's perspective, we are supposed to determine if it is taught. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Is it rote taught? Like, are you just teaching them how to do one move? Or is there a foundation that someone could come into your rehearsal and do across the floors and teach brand new things, and they have a depth and an understanding? Or are you simply teaching a routine and choreography? And if they do their arm the exact same way, does not necessarily mean that they're trained. Or what we're supposed to decipher is the depth of that training. And over time, throughout the show, it becomes pretty obvious if they were taught to do this specific choreography, or if they have the ability within their bodies that develops over time to have more of a fundamental understanding of the skills and of the moves. And Micheal said it perfectly. Nobody, especially young people, they don't want to stand in these blocks. They don't want to do that. They don't, but again, it goes straight back to ballet, classical, standing at the bar. There's really no other way to do it. It is what it is, if that makes sense. I mean, so training is absolutely fundamental. And I will tell you that we have discussions about units. They may all do it the exact same way and it's incorrect, but they're all doing it the same way. They're all doing it incorrectly. So we talk among one another. How do you evaluate that? How do you send that message? Because they have obviously been taught this way. It's not correct, but they're all doing it the same way. So I mean, we could have a whole session, Martell, on training, and you could really bring in a bunch of amazing people, including folks who are on right now. Ricardo, you train your kids very well. Yes, you could. So yeah, I mean, that's the crux of everything. And it is about fundamentals. Fundamentals are the same. It doesn't matter if you're in California or Boston or Mississippi. Fundamentals are fundamentals. And having students understand that, that's a lot of times we beat our heads against the wall because sometimes, whether it's time constraints or facility constraints, you have to get the show on, but you've got this full production and the students really are not compatible. The skills are not that compatible, but you've got beautiful costumes and beautiful props and beautiful flags, but their bodies are not necessarily at that level. I hope that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. I will say this. You said that kids don't want to stand in a block. From my standpoint, with my kids, and my kids may be an anomaly, we try to make technique block fun, and we make it like they understand the importance of it, and we stress to them the importance of that. So they love, the fact that Monday is flag block day, Tuesday is rifle block day, Wednesday is saber block day, Thursday is movement day. Like we have those set hours each day of the week that's done. And just, I think one of the things that I have noticed with my own kids is that when they start seeing that growth and being able to master that basic skill, and they see the correlation of how that basic skill ties into the choreography that they're doing, they feel way more successful. And also it doesn't help that the kids that leave and come back and they go to another color guard program, like an independent group, they come back and they say, oh, well, thank God we learned all this technique, because there's no way I'd be able to go and do this if I didn't have that foundation. So that's kind of how I see it. For anybody that's watching the video later, I cheat the system that way. And I let the kids that come back go, yeah, if we didn't do this technique block, if we didn't have this technique block, we wouldn't be marching at Crown right now. We wouldn't be marching at, Tampa Independent or USF getting these medals.
Well, and you're exactly right. And from instructor to instructor, so you sent a beautiful message that it really is about the way you look at it, the importance that you place on it. And Martell is this way too, because I've been in his rehearsals. I mean, it's the way that the importance that you place on it. They just are like ready, like, oh, okay, it's what you say, and it's the way that you frame those things and make that a priority. It becomes a priority for them. So that's beautiful.
I do 100% agree about making technique fun. I think that's to me where we can be innovative. Like with me, like every year I do the same technique exercises, but I put on a different song. Like we do, because like I always tell my kids to say, you never know what the band may do. The band may have a mind of its own. And so we're going to learn how to do our technique block in different tempos, because you never know what might happen. Like you might start at 120, and in the middle of the show, the band decides it might just want to drop to 160. You got to be ready to go with it. So I teach my kids to, we try to make it fun. We put different people up front, like not the same people is up front every day, because you get those people who are in the back. For those who are watching, the people in the back, get them to the front. Because the more you make them uncomfortable for being in front, the more comfortable they become within themselves. And the more comfortable with themselves, the more better performing they become. And that way you can have a better compatibility of skills from the whole entire guard, instead of just one set group, the people who are always in the front, they're always going to get the most information. So I always like to rotate my blocks and make sure that, you know, everybody's getting information, everybody's can showcase a skill, everybody can showcase the dominance of that skill. Evan, you want to chime in? I saw that.
Oh, no, I'm good. Everybody's pretty much said everything. I really, well, I guess maybe I do have something to say. I really have learned over the years that I've been teaching that it is so important to figure out the things that are pertinent to your kids that look good on your kids. Because I think, like, Micheal has said this, and even Breverly has said this, and even Ricardo, like you all three have said this. I think choosing, especially from a movement perspective, because I'm such a body focused, you know, type person, choosing especially from a design standpoint and like how you're developing a show, choosing your movement based on what you feel like your kids will look good doing, just by even watching their interactions, like on a day-to-day basis, like how they do their latest TikTok dance, because everybody, like every kid nowadays is like all about TikTok and learning TikTok dances, and some of the things that they do, learning to look at the different effort qualities in those phrases that they're learning and how they're approaching it, and like how they're accenting certain parts, and how some parts may be a little bit more fluid, will help you better decipher, okay, well, this is the type of quality that we need that looks good on them, that helps them be a little bit more expressive and maybe find some connectivity to whatever the show is related on. And then from a technique standpoint, trying to find the technique that balances that all of those things that you're looking for, again, just based on what you see with them, you know, trying different things and saying, okay, well, this may work and this may not. Like, we may be really good at doing saute arabesques, but our saute attitudes may not look that great. So that may not be something that we need to put in the show or in our technique block. So I think just being smart about those things and just really being aware that everything foundationally, especially within the way that our activity works, is body based. If you start with the body, the flag, the rifle, the saber, whatever is in their hand is just an extension of what they're doing. So I think everybody that has chimed in and said stuff has pretty much just summed all of that up. It's all about the individual. So
Awesome information, guys. Michael Lentz is having some technical difficulties. We're gonna get him back. So don't think he's done. He's not done. But I want to still move on to the next sheet, because we covered these two sheets, and I think Breverly really can dig into this one of the design analysis sheet. From this perspective, from a justice perspective, how important, because, you know, from an instructor, we get very personal when we put a show together. We put so much time in it, we put so much effort into it, to perceive criticism that we may not like. And how can we interpret that criticism we get from a judge and process that into the sheet to fix the issues that they may be seeing happening?
You know, and Michael, and you all, the experts in design of your shows, are will be great to speak to this also. I think one of the biggest things is making sure that designers understand the judge sheet, the points of comparison, the elements that design DA judges evaluate. And one of the things we're working on at the national level is to have our DA judges and GE, but really DA, to be more conscious about the design elements of body and equipment, and how that contributes, because sometimes I think they're so far away from that, you know, we're right, IA judges, we're right up on performers. I mean, we get it. And sometimes they're so far back that they're really looking at structure and orchestration and concepts and things like that, and not necessarily the level of skills that these amazing performers or students are doing. So that's one key element, but also to be able to ask questions. Hopefully judges, both at the local and the regional, instructors know what their chain of communication is, We didn't have critiques last year. We are working really hard, I think, at every single regional to bring critiques back and to know what kind of questions to ask. And, you know, and also to know that it's one person's evaluation. It's one person's perspective based on the score sheet as they evaluate your program. So I do think local judges have a lot to offer to help prepare and to help, you know, guide these units through these points of comparison. But just, I really think that the best answer that I have is understanding the sheets, understanding what the evaluators are looking for, and then understanding what to ask when either you disagree with the commentary, you disagree with the score. How do you get more information? And if it's not in a critique situation, hopefully there is an avenue of communication where you can ask those questions and get that information.
100% agree, but I wish WG offer. I know sometimes I don't know if the work class still can do this. I know work class used to give the judges an excerpt of what their shows were about, and the judge.
Yes.
I wish
The
that was
world class.
Yeah, I wish it was available for A class, because that way I feel like the judges can kind of get into the mind of the A class directors, what they're trying to do, and try to help them be more successful. But I know we're supposed to be
There's the problem right there, though, Martell. The A class is not about setting new bounds, which is what the world class is about. The A class is about fundamentally understanding that design. So that design for what your show is, a judge should be able to look at your show and not even hear the title of your show and know what it's about. That's the difference between the A class and the world class. So a lot of, and I'm jumping in, Beverly, I'm sorry. But
I'm glad you are, because we're making a point.
A lot of young instructors want to they want to reinvent the mold with a regional A or an A class color guard, and it does not need to be that. Like when you look at the A class sheets, it is literally asking you, do you understand the principles of design? Do you understand the principles of equipment, of movement? Are you making an effect happen with the audience using those basic principles that are there? You should not have to write a dissertation or give a dossier to the judges in an A class show. It should literally be, does your costume, your floor, and your flags make sense with this piece of music that you're doing? Are you portraying the emotion that the music is giving you? And are you telling us the story that we can understand in 4 minutes? That's it. That's it. There should not be a whole, you know, I'm going to give you this essay about what my show is.
Damn, Ricardo, that needs to go viral. That little snippet.
That do. I'm glad you took the bait. I'm glad you took the bait and jumping on that, because that is a misperception between a lot of young instructors, is that, you know.
It's true, Martell. It's very true. I mean, and the difference is, Ricardo said it beautifully, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But when we get into that world class with those advanced opportunities, and when they're challenging folks almost, you know, beyond physics and everything else, that sometimes those concepts we need a little help. Sometimes we just need some help. And so those, and it's a 1-pager, sometimes it's 3 lines, sometimes it's a full page, but you know, it just kind of adds to give the DA and GE judges just some information before they go in and start to try to figure this out in 8 minutes or 6 minutes, however long. But Ricardo's exactly right. And Martell, this is what happens. So what happens a lot of times is performers from, let's say, world teams or open teams or pretty advanced teams become instructors and overwrite or overproduce or because they can do it and they're so excited. I mean, I get it. You're so excited about that. But Ricardo said it beautifully. I mean, just said it perfectly. You simple show concept, write music, write costumes, write flags, you know, and have the kids, because it's the training ground for these other classes.
We live in an age now, especially with YouTube and TikTok, that kids look at color guard stuff. Like color guard is out there now for everybody to be able to see. When I was coming through 20 something years ago, that wasn't the case. Like I had to go and, you know, find the WGI DVDs and buy them and then put them in the VCR and watch the skills. But these kids literally are inundated with people who are amazing, but out there doing these cool things, and they think that that is what it's supposed to be. So then, you know, we get kids that are disappointed sometimes because they're not doing all these cool things. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, you go work on this trick and that can be a little feature moment for you, but we're not all going to be there. And as someone who teaches, who's training the next generation of instructors to come up, I always have to, like, they go and write all of that fun, fancy stuff that they've been doing in their world-class and open-class color guards, but they come in and try to teach the A-class kids and they're like, well, why can't they get that? And I said, well, baby, they are not 4 years into it like you are. You know, so we got to start at the beginning. Like we have to start at, what are we doing in our technique block that's awesome? Okay, how can we turn that into choreography? How can we turn that into a design so that we look strong and we look the same as we do it? It's not about doing those tricks. Those tricks are great, and those tricks are great for moments to give you that little added advantage. But in the A class, it's literally about understanding those principles of technique, understanding those principles of design.
I think James wanted to chime in.
Oh, good.
Hey, Corky.
James. Or not.
Hello, Beverly.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi, friend.
How fun.
I'm well. I'm trying to drive. I'm driving from New Orleans from a conference. We call it the Teacher Summit here. So I was here today, and so I'm trying to navigate this. Someone was calling about some other stuff we're setting up for the live band. Michael's still on here?
Michael is in the process of getting re-logged back in.
Okay, gotcha. What was the question y'all were discussing? I'm sorry, I had to take a call.
We were talking about new instructors that are from world class, open class level, teaching on the A class level.
Wait, say it again, Martel.
We were discussing about performers of open class and world class guards teaching on the A class level and making sure that they're appropriately writing for the kids and understanding the levels that the kids are spinning on.
Oh yeah. So I was going to think, Ricardo, you had asked Beverly this question about this implementation of technique, and you know, what are we looking for as a movement judge? And I oftentimes think what Beverly has once said. Sometimes the color guards looked rehearsed, yet not technique. They've been rehearsed, but so it's been done over and over and over again to almost, you know, it kind of sense that there is technique, but really there's none because it's just been rehearsed. Okay, do it again. You know, but have they really set in those technique blocks? Started with their pliés, started with their arm exercise, started with their tendus, their dégagé, their run jumps, and all those things. And so I'm always reminded of that to teach. Even yesterday we were in camp, is that you have to teach the basics. You have to refine that to establish the technique that we create, establish as I told my kids last night, the Lafayette way. It is the Lafayette way. It doesn't have to be the Braden River way, but it's the Lafayette way. How is it going to be that every kid looks just, kid A looks like kid B looks like kid C? You know, and so that's what the technique is, in my opinion, is that we've established the look, we've established the sameness, that every person looks the same based off what we've taught them. And so, but that does not translate to being rehearsed. That means that
James, it goes to that conversation that you and I always have about making sure that performer number 24 looks the same as performer number 21. I mean, it looks the same as performer number 1. And the closer that performer number 24 and performer number 1 look to each other is going to translate to a better understanding of, yes, we have defined what that technique is. Because if performer number 1 and performer number 24 are just practicing choreography, but they don't understand that technique, there's going to be a giant gap in between those two. But if number 1 and number 24 are working on that technique and understanding what that technique is, the gap between the two of them is not going to be that big.
Absolutely. And that's what we were talking about last night too. We were trying to teach our kids is that we have to use our eyes better as a performer, the dancer, to say, okay, am I matching the girl's energy in front of me? Am I matching their projection? Am I matching their turnout? Obviously, kids are gonna have different levels of turnout, but are we working for that sameness? Are we working to project what is our style that we've set aside for our people, for our team? And I think to speak on the thing about overriding, I believe what you're saying, or writing for the sheet, maybe is what you were saying, Micheal.
Yes.
Yes, I think that we have, that also goes back to giving kids the skills that support, again, your technique block. So if you're giving skills that they've never really done bonbons, and you're trying to get them to do branchetates, well, they're not going to get those flex up as high as they could be, because they don't have that flexibility to do it, because they haven't repped it enough or had enough training to support those skills. And obviously, we can fake it till we make it. We've seen those color guards that are faking it till they make it. Okay, but in the end, I am noticing that the WGI judges are sniffing through that. It's like, okay, you're giving them skills, but is it applying technique? And so I think this is where we get in trouble. So yes, Martell, can we give our kids, can we override it? Absolutely. But in the end, it will not be the grand champion. I guarantee you.
100%.
And I think so. Go ahead.
And James, I love it. First of all, I didn't know that all my favorite folks were going to be on here, Martell. You didn't tell me that. But James, you're exactly right. And why in the world I couldn't think of the word well rehearsed, but that's the debate that we have, or what we try as downstairs judges or IA judges. Is it well rehearsed or is it well trained? And we work on that consistently to be able to decipher, because you're right, that those are deal breakers, especially in the comparison process. Sure, they're all doing it the same, but is it well trained, and do they have, what's their depth of training? Is it just for this routine, just for this choreography, or is there some sense of, overall training?
And I think the easiest way to decipher that, Beverly, is, we're notorious for repeated skills in the show, especially with the novice classes, okay? And that's where you can see it. That's how I catch it. It's like, okay, no, they're giving us these skills, but they just did that skill at 30 seconds in, I saw the passe. At a minute and 30 seconds, I saw them do it again, but wait, the placement of their foot was wrong, or they did not, let me not say wrong, but for their technique that they're showing me, I'm not seeing the same application at 30 seconds to 130. I see the same skill, or even sampling from kid to kid. It's just not the same. And so, absolutely been able to decipher that well rehearsed versus true technique. And I think sometimes I've been able to watch if you go back, Martell, maybe even watch the group at WGI in A class that wins movement, and then look at maybe the fourth place team, you will see the differences. They may, like, the fourth place team may be giving more skills and more stuff, but the judges have said, well, rehearsed versus technique. That first place team, you're going to tell that they've been trained. Like, you can see it better. And I've just been doing some of that. I've been watching a lot of the videos the last couple of days and thinking like, oh, wow, this is why they won first. One group in particular, FIU, I fall in love with FIU, the church show recorder. And and I was like, okay, I see why they won first over this, because the other group, second place, is fantastic. Okay, but when you go to watch FIU, it's like, oh no, this is truly another level. Okay, or even the open class, what's the group from Florida? Michael's group.
USF.
Yeah, USF. I mean, like, watching their group from first place to second place. Michael's group didn't do as much stuff, in my opinion, but boy, were the excellence there. Like, it was so professional, and they didn't do a lot of hard, tricky stuff movement-wise, but the quality was there. So that's my input on that. Writing for the kids, it just has to be quality.
100% agree with you, James. I think you hit on a nail. Beverly, Ricardo, y'all want to? He summed it up. Thank you so much, James. So I'm gonna move to the next sheet. I'm still still trying to get Michael Ball back in. Move to the next sheet of general effect. I think Beverly, you can take the lead on this sheet. On making sure, when we're talking about effect, again, we all know it's gonna always go back to the training, but like from a judge's standpoint, like when you're deciphering the effect, like would the experience of the designer have that much impact on it just as a kid?
You know, and all of y'all know because you design these shows. But in terms of program concept and the planned effects and how that is tied together and how it makes sense from the beginning to the end, and that it's one long sentence, paragraph kind of thing, rather than one of the things that we see in the A class a lot are just isolated things. This happens and then this happens. So it tends to be, you know, rather choppy instead of, you know, there being kind of a through line that connects each of these opportunities. The other thing I think that's very important in effect, and Michael and Ricardo talked about this, and it's not the fake stuff. It's not like trying to cry or whatever. I mean, fine if that's what it calls for, but it really is this identity that the guard has. It's their role. Can they create, by being themselves and by working through the choreography, can they create a mood? Can the audience feel something, and not just, you know, from exaggerating a facial expression, but that's very effective. I mean, those are the aesthetic opportunities and the emotional opportunities. And it's about how ladies and gentlemen design those opportunities to make that happen. The other thing that's great in GE, I think, especially for A class, and Michael Lentz talked about this, it's that whole contrary motion thing. It's that whole, as the music, making sure that visual musicality, I would say probably visual musicality with these younger units, because you all know how to create that, building that visual tension as, you know, the dynamics, as we hear things happen. You know, what do you do so that as it crescendos, they're not just doing the same thing or drop spinning or whatever. You know, those things are really, really important. And it could be rather elementary, but it makes a huge difference. Makes a huge difference if we're seeing what we're hearing. And it does not have to be hard, I mean, tough or difficult in terms of skills. It just has to be musical and make sense. And the performers have to know their identity. They need to understand their role and the mood. And if you don't do anything else on this sheet, but you do those things, you know, you're on your way to being a good A team.
So Beverly, I'll jump in. I didn't put my two disciplines together because, for those of you who don't know me, I actually teach theater. That's my job in school. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago when I started having kids overlap a lot, where my theater kids were doing color guard, my color guard kids started doing theater, just because it's really the same thing, that we started talking about character development in color guard. And so one of the things that we do is like when I present the show idea to the students, you know, I tell them what my motivation was for the show, what I was thinking about it. I said, but you have to tell me what you feel and what you're going to think. So you're going to develop a character, and your character has to tell me the story from the beginning of the show to the end of the show. The same exact thing I do with my theater kids when we're working on a play or we're working on a scene. Like, what is your character's motivation to do this? What is this character's motivation to do that? Why? What are they trying to achieve in this moment, in this beat of the show? What does the character want to come through? And if you approach it that way, you will actually start to see your color guard develop that identity. And if you play into the strengths that your kids naturally have, like my kids always laugh and talk about they want to do dark shows and things like that. I'm like, well, y'all aren't dark kids. Like, y'all are always running around here happy and having a good time. and I'm running around happy and smiling and having a good time. Let's do a show that people are going to want to walk into the gym and see because they're going to want to have a good time. Like, let's do those shows because that's who we are. If our identity changes and we become sad people, okay, then we can do a sad show because we can pull that off. But that's not who we are naturally. Let's do who we are, and let's develop our characters from our experiences or what we think our experience would be if we were someone put in this situation.
Hey, I think that's amazing. And I think what you said is huge, because I think that bringing the character along with the choreography and everything, because what it feels like sometimes is that the character is laid on top of the choreography. And that's when sometimes the character controls the choreography. So there's excellence, and some kids are really into the character and others aren't, because it's not part of the DNA of the creation of that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like you teach choreography, and then, oh, this is who we are, and this is our role, and this is what I need you to think and feel after. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because that sometimes as an evaluator, and we can tell, I mean, when it is seamless and they pull us right in when we can't help it, and there's no words sometimes to describe it. It's just like, yep,
That's
yep,
it.
you. And you go to your thing.
I think what happens with that is I think that is that process of establishing character occurs from day one. Now, I love what you're saying, that people I agree with you, we tend to potentially add the character in after we've created a movie or after we created a moment. So now we want to be happy. Well, no, the happiness started day one. Like, we're doing a 70s show this year. We're doing the Age of Aquarius. And so at auditions, we were getting that character at auditions. You're going to be a woman from the 70s. I need you to imagine that. I need you to imagine these pleather boots you're going to be wearing. I need you to imagine this headband on your head. I need you to imagine these big old bell bottom pants. Like, we've already embracing this character from day one. So when it comes to say, we need you to sway your hips, they know it, that we've already taught it in the first thing they started doing. We started teaching the character so that it's embraced. Recall you talk about the dark show. We've done that at Lafayette when we've had a dark show, but that dark show started at the audition for Winterguard, and it was embedded in every dance class we did. To that character development of the improv stuff. I mean, it is fun as a teacher to see those kids grow into those characters, but it has to be, as I've learned this year, when you implement change is a process. So developing character is a process. There's the initiation, there's the implementation, there's the continuation of it. As you put it in the show, we have to see it from beginning to end. And then the outcomes, the judges are going to reward you for it, because it's all there. You've done all those 4 parts to make the character be present from, I always like to say, from 0. So if the show's 4 minutes, 4 minutes. So they've been exiting the stage in character, you know what I mean? So, and the team that I know that does character the best is the Blue Devils. So you can go watch that channel stuff and figure out they know how to do character. But he's already, if you watch their video, their little prompt they put out for this fall, for the summer show, you see what Blue Devils is going to do by watching that video. They're already working on it. So it's from the genesis of your concepts is that you have to teach that and embrace that character. So that's my thoughts.
I think you guys are all hitting on the nail about, effect can be a part of your training. I think you don't have to really look at them as 2 different things. You can merge the two points and possibilities together. Like when you are building a show or building a concept, you can start teaching those skills with the training. And that way, when you're choreographing for what the kids were able to do, it's a little bit better of a merge of those skills we're seeing, and then maybe that would translate to your program better. Ricardo?
Yeah, 2 things I hate that people train, especially young kids in the A class and below, is that everything is a smile and we have to do this L thing. And we're taught this L thing. You put the L here and that's where you perform all the time. And performance is not that. Performance is not about this. Yes, you want to lift and present, but I talk to my students about this is your soul, and you are projecting your soul up to the judges. However else, whatever else goes on, as long as this is presenting out to them, that's going to give you that edge. And when I love when kids go, well, am I supposed to smile on this part? I say, are you supposed to smile on this part? What is your character happy in this part of the, does this music tell your character that your character is happy? Well, it kind of tells me that my character feels a little sassy. Okay, well, sassy, is it a smile or is it a smirk? Like, and that's how we build onto those things. It's like, I'm not going to give you every one of the answers because you need to bring some of this to it. I can give you the mood and the feel a little bit, but how you interpret that is going to be you, and it needs to be natural to what you are doing, to how you feel. If you're not a person that's all smiling and giggling all the time, okay, that's who your character's not doing that. But what is your character bringing to this moment in the show? And those moments translate and build those effects throughout the show. If you continue to just add on and add on, take each section and go through and say, this is what I'm thinking as the designer, this is what I want. How do you feel? What are you feeling for this part? What does this section make you feel like?
Well, I also think too, y'all, is that when we think about effect, that music book is so important. The music book is so important. And I'm finding myself as I plan Winterguard shows, is to find that music, and it kind of ties back what you were saying, Ricardo, about just finding things that connect with your personality, the color guard. So that music is really going to help those kids, and it's got to be music that they like. It's hard. I don't know how people get this abstract music and they get their kids to like it, but it has to be a soundtrack that those kids can really connect with. Mm-hmm. And I remember for me, our last year, one of my strongest groups I've taught at Lafayette, we did the Potter, what's his name? What is Timepiece? And the kids felt they when they first started the season, they was like, what is this music? But by the end, we would walk into that gym and they were all singing that song, what is time? And they just loved that music. And so, what we saw from them? We saw a love of their performance. We saw a love of their show. And so that music soundtrack is truly a huge component and a huge catalyst to make them become better.
So we would say that the soundtrack choice is very important to the responsibility on the floor and how that translates back and forth, and that gets you a better success of your effect. Correct?
They have to have some type of connection with what they're doing, or else it's going to be artificial. If they aren't connected to it in some sort of way, and I mean, it may not be the type of music that they're sitting around listening to on their earbuds, as they're hanging out and chilling. And it may not be something that they're listening to on TikTok over and over again, but they have to be able to identify with something in that in order to be able to develop who they're going to be and who their identity is going to be as a team. We did the same thing this year. Our show was, a version of Coldplay's Fix You, and there was a whole backstory that's super personal, and I shared it with the kids, and I shared with them why it took me 12 years to finally actually put the show on the floor. And the kids were like, oh, we understand where you're coming from with this. And then it got to the point where they were like James said, you walk into the room and they're singing those parts, and like they get to the part in the song and they love that part because he was singing it this type of way, and they want to sing it on top of doing their choreography, and it becomes fun for them. It becomes that atmosphere. And so when they perform it and they're doing it in front of an audience, it's not fake, it's not artificial, they really are enjoying what they're doing.
I think it's very important for being a very new instructor. That is definitely expressed, and that talk is definitely had with your performance. Because I know, considering this was our first year, literally our kids fell in love with our soundtrack, and literally I will be talking to them, and then on our break, they'd be like, "Hey, I want to perform for you." I'll be like, "Oh, yes, right, you're on the break." And so it's like the little moments that you see the little personality come out, and it's the moments that you see growth in the understanding fully of the soundtrack. Because always. From perspective is what does when I play this music, what does this tell you? What does this? Here's Michael. What did this tell you? What does this make? How did this make you feel? And then the crafting of whatever technique we're doing at that point can be layered upon it, and we work on merging those two skills together, and that can create a moment. And I think that's where a lot of us A-class directors, or even in younger directors, sometimes we make the mistake of, we write the work first, like you said, we write the work first, and then we say, hey, perform it like this. And those kids never learned it that way. And it's really hard to make the correlation of those two different skills that we're asking them to do. So I think it's very, very important that you guys mention, start utilizing those skills in your warm-up packages, your technique blocks, because like I said, nobody wants to stand in a block and just do 100 and 100. Like that's what we call old school skills. How do we make that more modern with the time of the kids today and technology that's around us?
Yep.
I think we have Michael back now.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm only on audio. I don't. I'm trying.
You're good. We're talking about the general effect capture right now.
Well, that is an open can of worms right there.
You're amazing at general effect. So what's your perspective from a director on the general effect? Did I listen again?
I'm sorry. I think
There you go.
Well, something that I think is a pitfall for instructors is the way GE is set up with two judges, and possibly not enough information gets to the units about those two don't need to line up. That's why there are two of them. And then when you get to a final show, you have four of them. So it's good, I think the average all works, but not everybody comes into that understanding that the GE judges are not going to line up and score all the time. They may. Now, if they're splitting by boxes, then that's a good critique point to discuss. I think GE is a really interesting caption. There are some guys who judge it that will reward music choices. That has to be considered for sure. Depth of music. I think something that could hurt in GE is if you're doing a lot of 4 to 8 count phrases, which is a lot of what's happening in popular music. Phrases are short. So ask me something else about GE, like drive me here a little bit.
Well, we were discussing about, how to layer. Well, a lot of instructors will make a common mistake of writing their work first, and then they want to layer the character above it. It's like, how do we be more successful at teaching those instructors and teaching those students of combining those two skills when they're starting from the technique programs? Like you said, like you discussed earlier about how making sure that when the kids walk in the room, they're given that character, and those people, the judges and the audience understand what the show's coming out before they get to the first spin. So can you enlighten us a little bit more on that aspect?
Sure. Okay, let's stumble around GE here for a minute. I think setting the stage or setting the table is very important. There are groups that digitize everything, and when the show's over, we still don't know what it was about or what the kids were trying to convey. So sometimes you're going to have depth of an idea that may, like an onion, it's going to open and it's going to reveal these layers to you, but everyone's onion's not the same size. So some groups may pick music that is very entertaining to parents, but not necessarily being rewarded by the judges. So that is a conversation to have with your team about what your goal is. Personally, my hope always is to be beloved by the audience and the judging community. If you can make those two things happen, then that's great. But not every show is going to be appealing. I think GE can be about appeal. When the performers come in, their hair and makeup, how they set their equipment. Something that drives me crazy is the students will come out and they'll open up all their flags and then strip them and lay them down. It's almost like saying, hey, we're going to spend this in a few minutes. It takes the surprise or the appreciation of that. away a little bit for me as a teacher. Judges may not notice that as much. Mhm. I heard you guys talking about expression and things the kids are trying to convey maybe through faces. You know, there are some interesting things out there that the world classes do. And some of that can be done on a video audition. It can be done as homework. It can be done together, then refined. But what do you want on their faces? They're happy, they're sad, something in between, they're angry, this is a dark show, our hair's all down and it's wet, all the way to it's stoic. But I definitely agree with whoever I was hearing a moment ago with incorporating that into your training program. Competitively, the 40 downstairs will always lose to the 60 upstairs. You've got 60 points coming from the people furthest away from the group. And so if you have to split a caption somewhere, there's a competitive game to be considered. And I don't mean team to team as much as I mean the score reward. It's also interesting watching judges judge. So if you can get behind a judge, a couple seats maybe, and watch them as they watch your group, when they turn to the right, when they turn to the left, look down, look up. I think there's something to be said about watching how they watch what you're doing. Personally, I love to go in and watch every group in the class, just to see, and even from my own team, see how they come in and how we set up and how we exit. And there are always notes in my head. Okay, I think it's a really good thing to look at your competitors, and as you're putting this together, as you're building, and obviously you want to have a successful team, competitive, exciting, entertaining, all of that. You know, I was thinking about this right before I got cut out. Maybe at the end of each season, you have someone or multiple people that will just listen or watch the team or watch your team or everybody's team and provide some end of season feedback. So when you guys going to do this next year, consider these things. Maybe this drill move doesn't work for you, or toss heights are not cohesive. But I think that would be something I would consider doing at the end. So when you're thinking in the off season, that could maybe play into your minds a little bit.
That's a very smart idea. It is. It's a very smart idea. What do you think, Beverly, about that?
Oh no, I think he's exactly right, and I think that, and what I love, and I've learned so much on this call this evening myself. I think Michael, I mean, he just hits the nail on the head. Ricardo did, and James did also, and you know, we used to have, and I hate to go back to used to, but we used to have an opportunity that brought instructors and judges together, and we had sessions together. And we had, you know, then we'd section off into judges and instructors and stuff, but it was like a convention where we all came together because, you know, working in a silo as an evaluator, I mean, listening and in critique situations, we learn from you. And yes, we are there to explain why, you know, and we have to be accountable to our scoring and to the rationale behind that. However, we learn from you, and I mean every single class, even that, you know, A class, regional A, and I agree with Michael, and I just think that this type of forum that you're doing, I'm a little off subject, I get it, but this is powerful and pretty rich. And if there's a way that we can figure out how, you know, judges and instructors can learn together and learn from each other, I mean, I think it's wonderful.
I 100%
Go,
agree. And
Michael.
I would definitely invest I would definitely want to invest in something like that, because I think that's something that's definitely needed, because now we have so many different groups from so many different areas that constantly I see people in Facebook groups. I need help. Can somebody do choreography? Can somebody send me some flags? Can somebody do this? You know, not everybody has the biggest budgets to bring in the best of the best. And what can we do to help our community grow? So I definitely do think that is an opportunity that we can explore. I think I would love to invest in something like that.
I will say that I'm much better instructor after I went through judge training. Once I became a judge and I sat on the other side of the table and I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. And it really opened my eyes up. Now, granted, I sat with Beverly and I sat with Brett Feeney, and those are the people that like raised me and trained me. So I got the best of the best. But you know, it really is being able to sit down and have those conversations with the people that are judging and seeing what they're looking for, seeing what they're being asked to compare, and then bringing that back to your program. It changes the way that you design things. It changes the way that you look at things. And that's why I said with my earlier statement, like A class, like everybody wants to go out and try to be the next Onyx in A class. Girl, that's not where you're supposed to be right now. Them kids in Onyx then got their hands beat and their legs beat down for 4 years in a high school program before they go to Micheal Lentz to audition for Onyx. So they already are trained. When you are doing A class, it is about that training. How can you train those kids from day one to say, this is what we're going to be, this is our look, this is what we need to do, here are the skills that I need you to know, and we're going to play around these skills that we can all do that look good on all of us. That's how you do A class. But I learned it in judging. Dude.
I think to top it off, I think one of the skills that you know we commonly overlook is patience. Having patience with the process of starting from the very beginning. Know that the people who are where they are today, they all have to start in the same place that we are starting from. And nobody just come out the womb and just have a world-class guard and then just win gold medals like that first year out. And I think having patience with your performers, patience with your staff, patience with the process of getting from A to B, and learning, taking steps of learning and growing and educating, and taking risk and trying stuff, because you don't have to be the same as somebody else. Like you can, like Michael said, focus on what is truly to your kids. Like watch them on a break. I'm going to start doing that now more. I'm watching my kids on a break and see what their personalities are and see if that matches to the concept that we're preparing for them, and can they pull off the concept that we're preparing. Because he said, like he's on to something. When you put those true kids in a true format on the floor, you create magic, and that magic is something that, you know, whether a judge reward or whether an audience reward it, those kids gonna remember for forever.
This is Michael again. Listening to all that, I think I do it, and I know it happens with people I teach with. Not all the time, but you do stray. We forget that the judges are the biggest fans in the room, and they probably have the hardest job to do and will receive the least amount of praise for doing it. I think that's also important for the students to know. Years ago, I'm going way back here, 92, I think, went into a critique with George O, and I didn't know him, but I listened to his tape, so I played the young instructor get mad thing, and I flipped the sheet over. I said, do you know what these words are? He never got mad, anything. He was just very calm, very sweet. I was leaving critique, and the circuit president said, do you know he wrote those sheets? I was like, oh. But the beauty of that is he didn't tell me that. He didn't try to beat me down with that. He let me work that out on my own. And now we're very close friends. There's definitely something to be said for how we act, how the kids act, how we put things together, rehearsal etiquette. I'd love to know how you guys set up a rehearsal day. Like how much time do you have to do what you do? Say it's a 6-hour or 12-hour day. Do you have a formula?
For right now, we have because we're independent with very limited space. Our rehearsal facility, we only allow we were literally only allowed our rehearsal facility on Sundays, and we have a 7-hour rehearsal. We have a 7-hour rehearsal. Typically, we start in the morning. We start with stretch, then we go into our fundamental block. We don't even pick up. We don't even pick up. Really, don't pick up the equipment till after lunch. Like we focus on movement. We focus on. Then once we get to the move fundamentals, we focus on our. Then we kind of touch our flag fundamentals, but really hit them out, hit flag and rifle and saber after lunch, and then the end of the day, towards the end of the day, we are focused on our show because my idea is most likely on the show day you're going to be tired. So if you can endure a full day of doing technique, a full day of eating lunch, getting giggling with your friends and all that stuff, and you still pull out the performance at the end of the day, then you're practicing what a true show day is like for us because we have to travel somewhere. Once we travel somewhere, we got to unload. Once we unload, it's like we're pulling from friends or two color guards, so that draws down your energy. And then we have to go through our outside warm up, then we do our inside warm up, and every time we do our inside warm up and we get to the floor, you're pretty exhausted as a performer. And so it's that regimen of getting their mindset. Okay, I'm not just gonna walk in the show and perform. Like I got to be able to support. I got to be able to do things. I got to be able to build that stamina of, hey, I might be tired. I can still push the performance and give my best skill at the end of the day.
So Michael, I'll step in and talk about the scholastic program and our schedule. I have the added benefit of having my students 5 days a week during the school day for an hour class period every morning, first period during the day. And for everybody knows, I am never on time for anything. So my kids usually start class on their own because I'm always late. I have to drive across the sea to get to work. It's a whole thing. Anyway, Monday is Flag Day. Tuesday is Rifle Day. Wednesday is Saber Day for the kids who are spinning saber, and those who are just beginning their weapon journey still spin rifle on Wednesday. Thursday is Movement Day, and Fridays are what we call Fun Through Fridays. So every day the goal is to get through all of the elements within our technique block on that, but I usually pick one exercise that needs the most work or that we're struggling with or that we struggled with it in the days past, or if there's some type of skill in the show that needs work on, we'll focus on that more and then push our way through the equipment block. And that's the morning class. On rehearsal days, during a normal rehearsal day, we have 3-hour blocks. So the first hour of that block is completely focused on movement. We usually stretch for 20 minutes or so. We usually do some of our dance technique or an adagio, and then we work on across the floors. Then we typically spend about 30 minutes together working on flag altogether because that's your bread and butter. And then another 15 to 20 minutes, we split up. The flag line will work on stuff, the dance line will work on stuff, and then weapons will do a quick technique block. And then the last hour and 15 minutes is when we're working through sections of the show. And I try to plan out whatever needs to happen the most, whatever needs the most work on. We put our time in that. But literally 2/3 of our rehearsal is spent on technique and spent in that block doing that stuff. When we have longer Saturday rehearsal camps where the days are 6 to 9 hours long, the morning block is usually spent all on movement. Then we spend a couple 2 or 3 hours on equipment technique, and then we spend the evening working through choreography and working through stuff. So setting up that template of making sure that the technique is fundamental and that they understand that it is important, and putting that in every block. That the first half of your day is going to be standing in a block, doing what you need to do and getting better at that. That's how we work through our program.
Do you find that over the course of the season, from beginning to end, that stays consistent, or do you start more tech into more show as the season goes on?
We try to stay consistent with it. Sometimes we know, if something is going on or we have a goal, if there's a regional or if we have to record for WGI or whatever the case may be, that we got to get something done, or if, per se, one of the designers is in or one of the choreographers is in and something needs to change, then we'll deviate a little bit from it. but I stand pretty strong on making sure that the technique block happens at every rehearsal. Like that's gonna be the bread and butter. The same thing when we get to show days, like we probably spend 60% of our show warm-up just doing technique and doing block stuff, and then we spend 40% of the time running through chunks of the show. We don't even talk about it, because if we've established that technique and they know that, okay, this is what this rifle 5 feels like, and it comes out here and it goes up there, and that's what it's going to be. If we have established what that feels like, then you can do it with the body underneath it, or you can do it, you know, in context of where it comes into the show. But you have to feel where that is. And that's our approach to it. Not saying it's the best way, but it's the way that I do it, and I like it.
Sorry, this is James. So one thing we started doing at the university and at Lafayette is that, you know, for actually the show warm up, we would do obviously in movement. You can't do any equipment, so that became kind of our ensemble time to get the kids to be, you know, to get the performers to focus more as an ensemble, because we can't do equipment in that space. And so we would let that be our movement class for the 8 minutes. So we'll, you know, take some stretches, some across the floors. Okay, let's just do a kind of a mental run of the show. Let's mark it with the soundtrack running. So that, and then when we get to the equipment, we just put the soundtrack on. It's okay, this is your time, this is your 8 minutes. Take what you need for your show, because we've already done that technique from that day's rehearsal or throughout the week, you know, and so we let that be their time for the 8 minutes and say, okay, we may say, okay, let's run the flag feature, you know, because that is an ensemble aspect in equipment, but I try to let those kids have their own time to take their 6s, take their 5s, take their turnarounds. And, you know, obviously the staff is there to spend some time just kind of individually watching them and remediating as they see, oh, let me see you do that phrase, or you work on this phrase. Hey, watch this, in those warm-ups. In winter, that is. For fall, a little bit different because it's more outdoor stuff and it's more ensemble generated. So we don't allow as much of that because it's just more ensemble color guard. Micheal, our layout is much the same. As obviously we start with our movement class. I oftentimes our movement would be a stretch, and then we immediately go into what we call a projection exercise, which kind of implements some our plies and arm exercises, but we actually start our movement block off with performance. We want to see you stretch. We want to see the contrast, release, tension release throughout the exercise right off the get-go of our actual dance class after they've stretched. But I also use our opportunity to say, okay, even though you're stretching, we are also performing. So we don't just go through the motion. That we don't just do like a PE class. This is a performance. This is a performance venue, a performance group. So we want to perform through these exercises, because that does translate. We're doing reaches, we're doing plies, we're doing all those things that correlate to movement in our show anyway. So we tend to follow that same process. Yet I'm real big on performance. So we spend a lot of time trying to build those performance, their capacity to grow as a performer on everything we do. We try to obviously hit our equipment technique. Our layout is, we see our kids every day as well, like Ricardo. They have a dance class on Tuesday, Thursdays, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays are the equipment days. And so that's a pretty solid regiment that they know that's consistent each day, what their schedule is. We hit our flags, we hit rifles. We haven't really been doing a lot of saber lately with our A-class team. We've just been focusing on one weapon because they can get a little overbearing with trying to teach all pieces of equipment. And we found that it's not necessary, that it's just not necessary. Some of the top color guards have won A-class just with spinning flags and guns and movement. And so that's enough to captivate the A-class sheet versus the open-end world that you have those three forces. So we say, so we've kind of limited our technique block down to basically three things: our movement technique, our rifle technique, and our fight technique. We've started this year to re-implement saber, but I noticed even last night at rehearsals, like we just don't have time to get to all three pieces, to really sufficiently train them and get them to the higher level. Sometimes unless we extend the time or have to find those creative ways to say, okay, Monday is going to be rifle, Tuesday saber, but then again you're losing that consistency. As a band member, if I relate to what we do to band, the clarinet players play their scales every single day on their clarinet. You know, they don't have to put down the clarinet to play the bassoon. You know, and so our kids are lacking a little bit when we have to divvy up into 3 or 4 horses of equipment. You know, really 4 horses, their bodies, their gun, saber, rifle. You know, and so we've kind of watched some of the success of some of the other top groups that won A class. You know what? Less is more. You know, I look at Michael, what you did with the A class, your A class independent team this year. You had 1 gun. You know, maybe he was the strongest gun for you, and he said, "Hey," which I'm curious, why did y'all do that?
Well, it was actually 3 guns in the beginning, and one of the young ladies became injured, and the person that took her spot did not spin, so we took someone else out. And he would, you know, he fit the bill. He was a good gun.
It makes
He better
sense.
be my
It wasn't the first plan you had. I think, gotcha.
It wasn't, no.
Well,
Normally,
you're the king of minimalistic. So I was just curious. I was like, you know what? It's smart. You know, the kid is great at gun. So why make it more complicated with 3 people or 4 or 5? You know. So I loved it. So
Thank you. Just with those teams, I try not to do that everywhere, but I want you to see my work. Like, there's a cool thing happening. I don't want it to get lost in the digital print versus that's your canvas and you'll be on it. So I guess I like to show my work instead of just the arrival. But some people doing some wonderful things with the digital floors and flags and costumes. And that may fit the bill in A class really well in A class. I love hearing about what you do to prepare the kids, how you break your time down. And there's a lot of difference in that. And again, I think that's cool.
Hey, Michael, I should also probably add, because you don't know this, and most of the people that are watching this later don't know this. I live in Florida, so on Winterguard show days, we have full outside rehearsals because it's 80 degrees in January when we start competing. So we do a full out rehearsal block before the allotted movement and equipment time inside. So don't pay attention to my Saturday rehearsals if you don't live in Florida.
Hey, here's a tip. I found this to work for both the team and the judge evaluating it. On show days, we'll do a drill run. Pick up your equipment, but it's drill. So you're not dancing, you're not spinning. It just reinforces the structure of the composition. And I swear it works. And the kids get really used to that. I also like to flip the floors. We don't move the floor, but in the beginning when we're staging, we'll make the back the front. So we're looking at them from the back so we can see the show a different way. And we'll have them to the front. We'll still be writing. As the show goes on though, we'll do that. We'll perform to the back and to the front. And if you don't get rehearsal time or space on a show day, even if it's just weather, the guard could do, in body warm-up, the guard could do a drill run. Their spaces are going to be smaller, but that's really what the kids know is the relationship to the people around them. So if you ever try that, I swear it works.
I love that. I have never done that, but I'm going to steal that.
Feeling it too. I'm doing it now, honey.
I love that.
Write it out in my notebook.
Well, I mean, what it does is, I'm glad you said it does. It rewards both the kids and it also adds clarity to those judges because, in a sense, you're cleaning, you're getting spacing right. A lot of times the design announce guys will get you for not having proper spacing. Sometimes I know that's minuscule, but it does in the end, especially if your package is more drill based versus spot and such, So I think that's beneficial, Michael, to definitely implement those into, and it also forces them to think differently. You're not relying on the equipment now, or dance gear. You need to hit your drill, your formations,
Yeah, it works on the other side of the brain, I think. But
it also adds clarity.
Tell me how it goes sometime.
Thanks for sharing that.
When we got cut off, I think you were talking about critique, maybe. We don't have to go back, but
yeah,
I just want to make we got to talk about everything that you want?
Oh, we did. Beverly talked about critique, and we did talk about a lot. But I think this what you thought we talked about. Make sure. And I think you were on a good point at that point about etiquette with critique. I think if you want to finish that point, I think you can finish that point.
Well, may I, if it's okay, Jane, Michael, right before you jump in about critique, because one of the things that I would like to say that it tends to be a newer culture now about critique, but oh my gosh, like we really want to hear from instructors. Now in the A class, we talk more probably about goals of, you know, what are your goals and how can we help you achieve those goals and what kind of information do you want or do you need? But critique, just like how valuable to me this interaction is tonight for me, that critique situation, which WGI we really want to bring critiques back because when we use it correctly, it's a great learning tool. It's a great experience for us to gain more insight, to look at something differently, to, you know, and to hear you, and then for instructors to hear us as well, or be, you know, and make no doubt, I mean, we're very clear that we are accountable for our scores, and we need to have information and rationale for instructors locally, regardless of class, nationally, because we now have a system that we don't have to, you know, write a number down and turn the sheet in. So I hope critiques come back. I do think that there's a disconnect between us sometimes when those are absent. So,
Michael?
It was a lot for, I mean, again, something I have to remind the staff. The judges were at the show site an hour before the first guard went on, probably. And then, which means I had to get up early at the hotel. If they traveled in the night before, early, late, and then we want them to be their best judging the last guards out and their best in critique. I want to critique, but I'd also rather sit across from or watch the team while I'm watching rested judges do their job. So I know that's hard. The conventions we used to do, those were great. Just no stress, no politics. It was just things to talk about. I remember one of the equipment sessions, San Jose Raiders put it on, and they had people with the ribbon on a stick. And I think it was black and white stripes. I guess I'm going back here, like 91 maybe. But that, from one judge, got a really high score, and the room was not pleased with that. So it was really interesting to watch the instructors react to the score that this was given. If for no other reason, then it brings a commonality to all of us. Like, okay, this is the standard, this is where we are, and this is how we're going to get there. And it's always easy to world conversations on there, but in world class, more of what the world class teams are doing is evident to the judge when it happens. I think in A class, there are going to be a lot of similarities: size of floor, digital floor, costumes, hair, even music. You're going to find a lot of A-class groups could go any way, up or down, depending on the way the light hits them. So those are the teams I think need the most one-to-one critique. I don't know. I wish we could do something. Maybe we do video pre-critiques where we can have those uploaded and just can watch it. The A-class, there's so many groups, I don't know how to do that without killing the judges. Watching a regional at 7 a.m. Nope. God love you. Not doing it.
Well, I think you guys all made fantastic points today. At this point, we're going to open up our floor to anybody in the audience who want to pick Breverly or Michael's Lentz brand or anything. And they're here for you. So Anybody would have any questions? James?
Michael,
Hello.
hey, this is James.
Hi, James.
I need you to come to Lafayette.
You tracking me down.
Huh? Say it again.
I said, are you tracking me down?
I am.
Did we just talk about
So-
that later tonight? You want to talk?
Yes. Yes. I mean, yeah, Ricardo said, "Girl, I'm always working." So yes. No, I was gonna ask. Seriously though, I was just curious about the like the process. You know, we're trying to get to a new level with our teams, and so like when you're designing for a world class, and I work with Lake Area some, and I work with obviously Lafayette High School and the university. So we come up with these concepts. And I noticed with your A class, you always keep it very, very clear and simple. Can you talk about the voices? I guess what's too much? I mean, obviously the music drives what we create, but I do remember you and I had a discussion once about sometimes when there's less music, you tend to create more visually. So, but I feel like sometimes in A class, the judges are seeking less.
I mean, I think they're looking for the appropriate level for that class, that you're above the regional A, but also not ready yet for open, or maybe close to getting there. I think you just have to be identifiable, and whatever that is. Like if you're doing all right-handed on the piano really high at the top, going on lots of notes, then any judge is going to want to see you pick that up. Now, how you do it, how it's achieved from the students, too much, too little, will certainly be addressed by your downstairs judges, and probably all of them. But in GE, you could appreciate how that's really lining up musically and reward it. And that's a place where I think even studying the GE sheets a lot there to make sure whatever that moment is, that it's working for you. For me, I like to judge my own groups with the same criticism that I would judge another group. So, I mean, I'll be sitting in a room with my staff and they don't agree with me and they're mad I said it, but somebody's better than they're better. And if you're the best at that event, then you know how that should all work out. But I find that being competitive with myself is way better than trying to compete with someone else. And so that comes back to identities and being our own thing. There's way more growing. Looking at finalists in any class, it'd be awesome to see 20 groups or 15 groups be completely different. The only commonality, we have equipment and X amount of people on the floor. But that's going to help anyone. I know if I look at photos on WGI site or wherever, I know what group that is. And if I don't, because they look like a lot of other groups, then that team may not stand out as well as you want them to. I think affect is part of life. We're responding to things that affect us or things that can create effect. So to me, that's your human caption. Judges are normally a little more relaxed. They're waiting for it to come to them. And if it doesn't, they'll try to go in and get it. Did I even answer your question? I feel like I got away from you here.
No, I think that's well said. I guess the thing I would take from that piece is that you just made it clear is that we have to continue to be unique, to set yourselves, because so many teams do look the same. And how are judges differentiating that color guard A to B and just finding those places? And I'll just get back to your team in the A class. The one rifle thing made them stand out. Basically the entire ensemble doing just flag and more of a drill than just staging. I mean that made that unique. The color choice. You said something earlier that I thought was unique too, is that you don't do a lot of printed stuff. You keep it very clear on the floor so that your design comes forth. And I love that. So I like that. I want to take that process myself. Like less is more, and it allows what we are giving you to shine versus a printed tarp or printed flags. there are so much busy costume, right?
Indeed. Oftentimes Onyx really does use printed floors, but we'll pick the shade of pink or the shade of teal that we want it printed, and Field and Floor will just do a solid color on the tarps. So we are using printed things, they just don't have a lot of elaborate patterning. And that's something, it's all just so different. And I love hearing that concerns you have or thoughts you have are similar to other people in other parts of the country. And really, this is a place where we could all grow, is there's so many things we already agree on. Maybe we start where we don't agree and dig into that area.
Hey,
When we did
Michael,
Sleeping Giant back,
and,
go ahead.
and Michael, you mentioned earlier about how, I think you said 2009, that the color guard, you decided to do something completely different with the color guard, and that became a recipe and an aesthetic of Onyx. And can you explain to people who see this the ability to take that risk or to like kind of reinvent yourself, and what was the thought process of okay, this is how we're going to do things completely different than what we've ever done before? And then Breverly, can you tack at the end on how judges view something that is really hard to view, well, hard to understand because it's something you've never seen before, and how do you put it in a box, and how do you grade and appreciate and award based on the sheet to that?
When we started that season, at auditions, we told the performers we were taking a new direction. And as we got into rehearsals, we reinforced that we feel that we had wandered maybe enough. Some shows had more impact than others, and we wanted to get away from, well, I think the best way I could say this, we wanted to stop trying to compete with other local world guards that were doing their thing, XYZ. So we decided to dig our own pathway and see what happens. It was a little scary the first day because you buy in from the students. And we played the soundtrack for only one person, so they hated it. And he's a long time ago. So we just changed what we did. We limited the staff. There were only 4 of us there every practice. And the movement choreographer was 17 years old. She was in high school. But we just did our thing. Like something that we would never do, most people wouldn't do, is we got white flags. I took them outside the Nutter Center and drug them to the mud, lots of grass stain, but the printing on the flags is just dirt and grass stain. But that kind of fit what we were trying to do. And Sleeping Giant was a piece of music that I still love today. Things like it. It's one long musical event. But then it just pulls you into write, and you can just write and write and write. When you're creating flow, I would recommend every color guard do shows without stopping points. But that took us where we want. And then I just started responding. So Sleeping Giant was done. It was cool. No one liked it, really. No judges liked it. The audience did it. Even at World Championships, I think one person clapped, maybe one time. But that show grew into appreciation later on. So 2011, then I was upset for Onyx about how they got treated in 10. Not the winning or losing thing, but just some of the reactions. So 2011 was a response to how they were treated in 2010. And then from there, we decided to do something happier and lighter. And there's always going to be a moment of fear. We stress out, like, is this piece of music, like, should the A guard be using it? Like, you freak out. You're all going to freak out. And that just means you care, and you're trying to find your way to weave all of these things. But now you have kids, you've got gyms you got to work with, staff, parents, transportation, get to a show site, everybody running it, warm up, 5 to 10 judges, but out, get all this stuff folded, and it's a lot. So another thing I always ask the staff to do is the way you behave at practice is how I want you to behave at a show. for me, a score killer, and this is just me, but in GE, a score killer would be they're counting on the floor. I don't know why the color guard's counting, but they are. Making too many faces that don't seem appropriate for the gym, that kind of can kill it too. Music too loud, instructors staying on the floor and hugging every kid before the performance, or standing at the sound table just screaming every time someone catches. We, at Onyx, we try to keep that to 0. We don't do that stuff. But I know audience members, if you're standing behind them, and it's hard to imagine, but everyone can hear the staff where you're standing in UD Arena. And if the people in the stands hear so much clapping from behind them, I think it shuts them down from being in the moment, because they're now being, and it's not like a whole arena situation, but the staff was screaming for everything, you know. And I know she might have gotten that for the first time. She's worked on it, but then that's the guard's job to talk to her after you leave the gym. Something else you guys talked about, you talked about being, I think what helps all of us is if we try to be present at a show. If again, going back to judges, if they're tired, it's hard to be present. And maybe the group before them just did something that made them cry. That happens. And now you got to get yourself together for the group doing the Haunted Forest, okay? They're human, we're human. So I just hope that we can all be in the moment, work through our own problems. And so the kids, when they hit that one, you're like, that's it. The judges, you know, they got that too.
All right, and Beverly, can you give it the standpoint from a judge of like seeing, like, you know how, you know, he's talking about Onyx reinvent themselves. Like, how do you, from a judge standpoint, like if something that is, it doesn't fit the mold of a normal show that you used to judge and see and appreciate, like how do you find the terms to describe what you're seeing? How do you put that in a box or a category that, you know, you're in an area you've never experienced before?
Yeah, that's awesome. So if we're talking about, to begin with A class, I think it goes back to what we were saying about identity and role and standing out from the others, and, you know, performers knowing who they are and what they're doing. When we're talking about, you know, the world class or any of those advanced opportunities, you just, I mean, you, from an IA perspective, you know, we're struggling and working and digging in and trying to get it and see, you know, what types of complexities are happening, what environmental challenges are there, what's the level of difficulty and, you know, risk and those kinds of things. And it comes in all forms. It comes in all forms. It can be in your face velocity and, you know, flying things. It can be sustained, slow, and, you know, in sense of strength. I mean, it just really depends. And from a judge's perspective, we have to continue to challenge ourselves to be open, be ready. We might not have the words or the verbiage to actually be able to describe what we see, but knowing how to value that, knowing how to utilize the criteria and the sheets to find where it goes there. The other thing, though, I think that's most important would be in the comparison process. So evaluating units, figuring out which box someone goes in, top of box 4, bottom of box 5. But most importantly, I think, especially toward the end of the season, deals with that comparison process and how we make decisions within these neighborhoods, and making those decisions within the neighborhoods. It's really almost splitting hairs, and it gets really down to some, you know, nitty gritty kinds of trying to answer the questions conceptually about points of comparison, who has more this or that range. Yeah, I mean, it just gets really tough. But it's a great challenge. And as an evaluator, it's our responsibility to continue to work on this craft and to grow, and it's not just about the world class, it is also the world class helps us to set the paradigm at the top and then establish the paradigms for the open and the A's. But to challenge ourselves to be relevant and accountable for our decisions.
Also, well, thank you, Micheal. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight, and everybody that will see this on a video when we send it out. If you have any more questions, feel free to email us at futureindependentwinterguard@gmail.com, and I can those questions to Breverly and Micheal, and they will love to give you feedback on your problems or any things you feel like you need to discuss. Our next roundtable will be happening next month. I think we're talking about fundraising and facilities, I think. Yes, we're talking about fundraising and facilities, and we'll be announcing those speakers soon. So any final words from you, James and Beverly?
I was going to say thank you for the opportunity to jump in tonight.
Thank you so much, James. And anything from you, Mr. Lentz?
Sure, Beverly. Something that I love and the performers love is that you still speak human. If you're still in the room, you know you're in the room and not on autopilot. So it's always great to be judging. Guys, thanks for inviting me. And if anybody has any questions you want to follow up or something comes up, you can always email me or call me, and I can help you through anything.
Thank you so much, Micheal. I'm definitely going to be giving you a phone call.
Anytime.
Martell, thank you. Thank you so much for putting this together. I really think I mean, this is a great model. I think that other, regions and locals and folks should really do. I've already been texting people to say, hey, this is awesome. So thank you. And Micheal, thank you very much for that feedback. I appreciate that. And I loved seeing all of y'all on this evening. I had no idea it was going to be James and Ricardo. I knew Micheal was here, and Martell, and of course Evan.
Oh, I never passed.
Thank you, Martell. Thank you.
No problem, no problem. As always, we appreciate you guys for everything you do and everything you give to our community, and thank you for making our community great. As always, here at Future, our motto is we're all stronger through education. And so thank you for your time. Appreciate you guys. Have a great night, and send us your questions, and we can't wait to see you for the next roundtable.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right, how do I end this thing? There we go.